This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
All right, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us here tonight on The Express. Had to tear myself away from a excellent television show, which I will get into in just a couple of minutes. This is Gary Allen, and you are listening to The Express, and I thank all of you very much to take a few minutes out of your day to join us here for tonight's edition of The Express. We have a great show for you, but as I was saying, I had to only because of who the guest is tonight, Miss Ruth Kaufman, am I even doing the show. Because there's a special on about Tony Bennett, and those of you that have listened to the show over the years know that I worked with Tony Bennett at one time, and Michael Bublé was on before that. I just want to remind everybody that after the first of the year, this is our last show until the first week in January, right after the New Year's. And by a month from now, you will be able to go ahead and go to my website, which will give you all the information you can possibly need to find out about me and some of the places you can listen to some of the shows. But for now, I will just remind you to go to Facebook to Gary Allen, A-L-A-N, or if you want to go to youtube.com, this show will probably be on by Friday afternoon to Gary Allen, The Express. Thursday evening at 7 o'clock, this program repeats itself on our sister station, diversitybroadcastnetwork.com. Also on progressivevoices.com, go to their demand channel as well as their app, and tunein.com. If you're already with TMV Cafe, then you know exactly what to do. You can listen to all the wonderful, wonderful programs that we have going. And as I said, I'm doing this program tonight because this young lady and I, incredible talent, absolutely incredible talent as an actress, as well as an author. And a quick story as soon as she comes on the air with me here in a minute after I get through introducing her. But otherwise, I'd be sitting watching Tony Bennett, who I have worked with many, many times. My guest tonight is Ruth Kaufman. She's a Chicago-based author, actress, on-camera voiceover talent, freelance writer, editor, speaker, masters in radio and a JD and masters in radio and television. She loves peanut butter and chocolate milkshakes. What a combination. She loves singing at the symphony choir, chorus rather, and she loves going to the theater, and in many cases probably going because she's going to be performing. So with that said, Ruth Kaufman, welcome to The Express.
Thank you for having me, Gary. I am taping Tony Bennett.
Oh, I'll tell you what, and the show before that was Michael Bublé, and that was my last contract that I had as a stand-up comic. I worked with Michael out in San Diego earlier this year, January of this year. I worked with Tony in San Diego. I worked with him in Vegas. Two of the nicest gentlemen you'll ever want to meet in your life. Just fantastic. Now, the story that I was even surprised about, and so were you, and for all of you out there that are wondering what I'm getting at is, I lived in Chicago for a number of years, and apparently during those years, at some point or another, whether it was at the whole time that I was there or a short time that I was there, Ruth and I lived in the same building. Now, we didn't know each other. Ruth did not know my wife, Grace, either. And it's just ironic how you can live in the same building, which was a nice building. It's one of the oldest buildings in Chicago at 535 North Michigan Avenue, but it's also one of the safest because in the walls were iron plates. And also it's the same building where Nancy Reagan lived with her mother and her stepfather for a number of years. And if back in those days, Ruth, if you listen to some of the old timers that were there, they would tell you how wonderful the stepfather was, but they didn't care much for Nancy, or they didn't care much for the or for the mother. So, but I got an earful. But I miss it during the holidays. I miss Michigan Avenue, something awful. But after that, you can have it. It's way, way too cold. As I said at the beginning and the top of the program, you are Chicago-based. You are an author. You are also an actress. And you have created a series of books which, as I put on my Facebook page today, deal with medieval times. We will get to that in a little bit. But first, I want people to get to know you. When you were growing up, and you're Chicago-born, so you're from the Midwest, was reading always part of your life?
Yes. I lived in the Beverly neighborhood, and we had a beautiful little library up on a hill where I would go all the time and just get a lot of books. And my mother encouraged me to read at a very early age. There was some sort of cartoon thing in the Tribune that helped kids learn how to read, and so she taught me how to read at a very young age, and I've been reading ever since.
Yeah, most authors or writers that I talk to, or journalists in general, will say, yes, I was an avid reader, or yes, I wasn't as avid as I am today, but yes, I always enjoyed reading. I enjoyed reading. Unfortunately, I suffer from dyslexia. So as a younger
Oh.
age, until I understood what it was that I had, and how
Hmm.
to overcome it with a little bit of training. I was made fun of in school and picked on, and I was always when it came to the English classes, always in the, not the high school classes that prepare you to go on to college, but
Hmm.
I forget what they call them, but I was always in the dunce classes, like, still reading weekly reader and all that other crazy stuff, until finally one teacher in high school went, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. If you talk to him, he's intelligent. Something is not right. And so they gave me a test and they said, you suffer from dyslexia. And I also have it with numbers quite a bit too. But I love to read. I try to spend at least 2 hours every day reading one of my books about something or another, whatever. And I've always found authors and writers and journalists in general are avid readers and love to just suck up everything that's in front of them. Was show business also part of the world you wanted to be part of, or did that come along later?
No, I liked that at a young age as well. I remember still my first lines in a Christmas holiday pageant, and
Uh-huh.
when I got my first laugh, I was hooked. And so I had the lead in several grade school plays, and that was that.
You and I have something else in common. My first play that I ever did, I played one of the three wise men.
Ah,
And
well, this wasn't an actual, it was more just we were given lines about things. I don't believe it was a specific Christmas story per se.
Yeah, I was one of the three wise men.
Yeah.
We were on a wooden stage, and when I
Mhm.
knelt down, I guess I'm not exactly light on my feet. So when my knee hit the
Mhm.
wood, it would go boom, and there'd be a laugh, and I
Oh
went,
no.
"Ooh, I like that." Yeah, I like that. I like that quite a
Yeah.
bit. So that's
Yeah.
where.
Well, I
Um,
was the littlest Billy Goat Gruff in first grade. I remember that.
huh. So you got the
Three
acting
Billy
bug.
Goats Gruff.
So you got the
Yeah.
acting bug very, very early, but
I did.
you also did something very smart that a lot of uh, people who want to go into show business or who want to be writers, you went and got yourself an education. And I'm
Well,
sure
that
your
was my
parents,
dad doing.
yeah,
Yeah, my dad was very against creative careers and believed that there were really only three acceptable jobs that people could have.
really. What were
Hmm.
those?
A doctor, a lawyer, and owning your own business.
Ah, yeah, the typical,
So,
yeah,
yep,
yeah, the sort
yep.
of atypical kind of situation. And you got an education from where my mother went to
Hmm.
school, Syracuse University. Of course, she went back in the 30s. She was there, and you also went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. You got your BA in communications and economics.
Yes.
Um, and I know you've used that well since, but uh, for everybody out there who, as we get to know you through this hour, talk about how important it has been for you to have that education to fall back on, because so many people get into the show business world and
Hmm.
they're mystified, not mystified, they overestimate their talent, or they underestimate their talent, and we're going to get into the whys and wherefores of a lot of that later. But you do need something to fall back on. You just cannot go through life thinking that you're going to go from one acting job to the other unless mommy and daddy are somebody in the business.
Well, there's two ways that having an education helped me. I'm not sure it would be the same for everyone. One way was that because for a long time I was too chicken to pursue acting as an actual career, I had quote unquote real jobs and was able to start setting aside some kind of a 401k as a real, working bee person would do that a lot of actors don't do.
Right.
So that was one. And the other thing was I was in sales and marketing, so I'm able to apply sales and marketing and business skills to working with my clients now. And for some actors, it's just an education that they never received.
Right, right. I was unfortunate. I went to 4 different universities, but didn't get a degree in any one of them, and I just went into radio almost immediately when even before I finished at the University of Miami, I went right into radio, and at that time degrees weren't part of the world. As a matter of fact, up until like the 90s, even people that worked in television really didn't have to have degrees to be anchors. If you just read the news and you looked cute on TV, you got the job.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, of course, that's an entirely different thing. If you don't have a degree in journalism, you're kind of on the outside looking in. There are an awful lot of people, and you're in one of the great cities for theater. You're also in one of the great cities to be discovered by agents and to work as if you were to look at this young lady's resume, folks, you would see all the productions that she has been in over the years. And believe me, it's an awful lot between film and television, internet, new media, theater, improv. Did you study at Second City at all?
I did. I graduated from their training center and also Comedy Sports and Improv Olympic as well.
Ah, boy, that was one thing that when I was at the Groundlings, and everybody out there may not be familiar with the Groundlings are like Second City out in Los Angeles. I never really enjoyed theater games all that much as part of the training, but it was necessary to overcome it, and you do actually learn something from it. But were you there? When were you there at Second City?
I was at Second City sometime in the 90s.
Okay, so those that were there during the time, and the time that I was there, Andy Dick was a student there, along with Farley and some of the others. You were there afterwards.
Yes.
So you would know some of the cast from Saturday Night Live now, actually, because some of them were there. Tina Fey.
Those people were not in my personal classes. They might have been, they do have quite a few classes there. It's not like they just have one at a time.
Yeah.
So, there were some people in my classes who did go on to LA and New York success. But it was it's a great foundation, I think, for all other kinds of things as well. Too. So, I mean, it's good for people who don't even want to be actors to take improv because you can really learn to think on your feet and that kind of thing. So. Yeah,
a lot of comedians like to study improv if they want to improve their ability to audience reaction and things like that. We even had, I think, in one of the classes I took, we even had salespeople come in and take some classes just so they could loosen up a little bit when they had to give presentations and things like that. But I was very lucky. I had Kevin Costner and Bob Saget in my class, so it was never a dull moment between the two of them. That was for sure. In Chicago in particular, I know you do a lot of voiceover work, and I had a couple of agents up there. I don't even think they probably exist anymore. But what is the difference that you find between the actor, whether it be voice or on stage, that makes it, and the one that doesn't? And I mean, when I mean the word make it, I mean making a living at it. There are so little that do make a living at it, and I'm not even going to Hollywood yet. I'm just talking about New York or because let's face it, Chicago is a theater town. It's a wonderful theater town. Many theaters going on there.
Many.
What do you find the difference between, say, you and someone else? As far as making a living? Go ahead.
There's several things. First of all, for most people, I think it's not enough just to have talent agents. You have to find ways to bring in your own clients and your own work for voiceover, especially because there's so much competition, in my experience, with agents. That when you're auditioning for something, you have no idea how many people you're competing against. So if you can find your own clients, you're building a steady source of your own income, and then anything you book with an agent is sort of gravy, as opposed to some actors that I have come across who just say, oh, I have an agent, but then if they don't have that many auditions or don't have that many bookings, they don't sell themselves on their own, so to speak.
Yeah.
So again,
Agents
that's just my experience.
And then there's also
you have to have an agent, though.
Oh, but there's also that thing. I remember talking to a very famous actor in LA about it once, the difference between the people that make it and the people who don't make it. And he said, well, talent and connections is one thing, but you have to have that special thing. And I know in the voiceover world, you could have 5 voices auditioning for the finalists for a piece, and this time you'll get it, next time you won't get it, and it could be the same producer. So it's got to be something that they hear in your voice. I know when it comes to commercials, and you do those as well, I'm not suited for that because I look too much like Jay Leno. So I'm immediately eliminated from doing any of that in my life. And talk to people out there, because you said earlier in the conversation that you waited a while before you decided to get into acting. Talk about some of the steps that you took to get where you are, the training, the coaching that helped to get you where you are.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was a master plan, but it really wasn't. It's just that when I had my real job, I wanted to make acting part of my life. And when you have a real job, you can afford to take the classes, to get the headshots. When you're an actor who is, let's say, a waiter or sort of scraping by, it's hard to come up with the fees for Second City classes, and quality headshots. It can be hard. So I was able to fund those things and all the training while I had my real job. And but what was hard was that if my agent did call with an audition, when you have a real job, you can't always say yes, and they do expect you to pretty much always say yes.
Yes, they do. But
so,
what were some of the steps? I mean, what was the first step that you took when you said, this is what I want to pursue? Where did you go? Who did you talk to? For people out there that are thinking about getting in the business, maybe you can help them with their first couple steps.
I will try, but I was really acting my entire life. I acted in college shows. I worked at the college radio station. Even in graduate school, I worked at a classical radio station. And, so I was always trying to fit in some sort of actual experience on the side. So that helped. And then while I was at the radio stations, I also worked at a radio station in another state where they let me do some radio commercials. So that gave me a little experience behind a mic and actually doing and writing some commercials. So when I was able to get my first on-camera agent and they started sending me out on auditions, I took some on-camera auditioning classes at some of the schools here. And then when I decided it was time to finally go into voiceover, because for a long time, to my eye, the cassette tape demo that you had to create just seemed like such a barrier to me.
Really?
Back in the day when it was cassette tapes, and it's just like, how am I going to find a producer? And I'm going to make all these cassettes, and then I have to get the graphics, because you had to have back then the really slick graphics on your demos, and it just seemed daunting to me, and I didn't have any connections. But then I finally took a voiceover class, and things were changing into MP3s, so it seemed a little bit easier. And that voiceover class that I took helped lead me to a demo producer, and so it just went from there. And since I already did have an on-camera agent, by the time I had a voiceover demo, and they liked it, and then I started booking voiceover jobs. So, a lot of voiceover is not just about having a good voice, it's about, can you interpret the copy the way the clients want to hear it? And I think some of my acting background, my improv training, it all sort of helped me be able to interpret copy. Now, another thing, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm just listening.
I do a lot of e-learning courses, and I do a lot of medical narration. And I think that having my law degree, and I also did work in a doctor's office for a while, to help me develop a business vocabulary that is helpful in the e-learning market. And when you've had a business training and you're talking about business topics, it's easier to make it sound like you understand what you're saying and not just reading words off the page.
Right, right. And talk about the fact that talk about the fact that nowadays, back when I was doing voiceover work in Chicago and other places, you didn't have home studios. Now people have home studios. Everybody does. So you don't even have to go to an agent to audition anymore. You usually do it over the internet, and you MP3 it to someplace, and then they get back to you. Talk about the expense that goes in to that as well.
Well, that's a both good and a bad thing, if you ask me, because when you don't go in for an audition, you're not building relationships with people, and you're also self-directing yourself, which I think is the hardest thing of all. When someone says to you, can you be more friendly, you're hearing it in your ear, but you want to hear it in the client's ear. And so if you're doing it yourself, that's a challenge. But home studio can range from hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars, depending on the microphone you choose, the headphones, if you're going to build an isolation booth in your home, or just try to see if you can use some moving blankets, what kind of foam you want to get. I mean, I know people who have all different kinds of things. And so depending on what kind of business you're aiming for, that's really the first thing is the someone who wants to go into voiceover for sure, and on camera as well, needs to really know what the business is. You can't just say, I want to be a voiceover, because as you know, there's so many areas of voiceover.
Yeah. And and the competition is just, I haven't pursued voiceover work in years, mostly because forever and a day, I've always been told, well, you were fine back when, but now you sound too much like a radio guy. Well, I'm a radio guy. That's my background. And for a long time, I really didn't care about doing any more. I mean, I did when I lived in LA. I was fortunate enough. This was before the proliferation of animation the way it is today, where it's all the big stars, and even the second and third of voices in a picture are people of note. I used to go in and believe me, I used to do animation left and right, because I do a lot of character stuff and a lot of impersonations and stuff, which my father said I would never make a dime doing all these character voices and voice impressions, but I made a ton of money in LA on it. But I don't pursue it. And I have one of my dearest friends, well, two of my dearest friends, Randy Thomas and JJ Wilson, who are always after me to please get back into it. But I'll be honest with you, I really don't. Back when I started, you were talking about cassettes, Ruth. That's how we got the information out, and it went to agents, or we had CDs and it went to agents. Now, again, it's the MP3 and stuff like that. But getting back to the main point you were getting to, the competition is so fierce. I would imagine, I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine that if something's put out there on 123, whatever that company is out of Canada, they probably get submissions in the hundreds.
Well, I'm on a couple of those sites just in case. And what I have noticed is if you don't pounce on auditions that come in through what they're called pay to play services, because you do pay an annual membership fee to be listed on their site, and then they send you auditions. If I don't audition literally within minutes, they might have 30 or 40 within an hour, and I don't know that it's worth it to submit when they already have that many and may not even listen to yours.
Yeah,
that's my philosophy.
My buddy JJ Wilson spends his entire day sitting in his little studio, which is from a closet that he has all foamed up. It's really nice, and that's all he does. He watches, he gets submissions, and he does maybe 30 and 40 car commercials a day. And he'll do some long form commercials. He'll do short form, hard sell, soft sell. I'll talk about that also for people out there that are unfamiliar. They hear the term hard sell, soft sell, and talk about the different variations. If you're going to do a documentary, if you're going to do something medical, And by the way, women's voices have become more and more popular. And you can understand why for an awful lot of VO work in this world. But talk about the different types of VOs and what is necessary for one to understand where they belong in the voiceover world.
Well, I think most people, when they think of voiceover, at least actors, and they say, I want to do voiceovers, I think they're thinking of commercials. So because there is a lot of commercial work both online and through agents. And so the first tool that you have to have is a commercial demo. And it can't just be you sitting at home recording yourself. You really need a produced demo that makes you competitive as you can be compared to some of the top talent in your town or regionally or wherever you're trying to submit. So commercials is a whole class. And then nowadays, some people might even refine that, as you're saying, and have a hard sell, which is more high energy, and then a soft sell, which is more low energy, and maybe even more conversational to show that you can cover sort of the gamut. There's a lot of real person kind of stuff going on. There's testimonial commercials, the kind of thing like, I'm so glad I went to this hospital for my knee surgery, so you certainly can't sound like an announcer if you're being a patient or that kind of thing. So knowing the market is really a huge aspect, and seeing where you're going to fit in. Then there's also narration demos, which could be web videos. E-learning now can be a separate demo, the kind of thing like, hi, here's how you can enroll for your health benefits. I even do some phone messaging work, the kind of thing, press 1 for more information. I'm sorry, I did not understand. I do some of that.
You're the person I want to kill.
I want to kill that person too.
Oh God, we've got one. We've got one here for my phone service and my internet, and it goes, so tell me why you're calling. Can I speak to an associate? I didn't understand. Can you tell me why you're calling? Yes, can I just? And it's like I want to, and the person who probably recorded this is a really super nice person. We're talking to Ruth Kaufman, who was an actress and a writer, and we're going to get to her wonderful books here in just a little bit. But we're concentrating on voiceover work and acting, and Ruth is out of my hometown of Chicago.
And so there's different, and some people, I don't know that I have the voice for it, but, you could certainly have a promo demo to promo radio and TV stations. So there's sports demos, there's, so it just depends what kind of work you're going to go after. And then, of course, the on-camera market is a whole nother thing, because then you need headshots and have to, go to auditions and now do a lot of self-taping for those.
Isn't that market nowadays for commercials, and it has been for the last 20 plus odd years, if you don't have that mom and dad look, generally speaking, you're outside looking.
Not at all. No, I'm not. I have never been a mom in a commercial. I don't even usually get called in for the wife. There's plenty of quirky neighbors, teachers, aunts, doctors, there is a lot of mom stuff in the Midwest, but there's plenty of other stuff too.
Yeah. And by the way, the money for voiceover work, it can be extremely lucrative. I was talking to JJ the other day, and there is one client in this country that every year auditions voices, and that person is for almost $1 million a year on their beck and call 24/7. They're all screaming car commercials, but at the end of that year, you're so burned out, you cannot do it again. And that's why they go to a new voice every year. It's just absolutely unbelievable.
People don't understand that. Voiceover work can be grueling. If you're in that booth for hours on end doing audiobooks, let's say, or that's a whole nother market, or long form narration, it can be hard, or like you said, screaming, it can take a toll.
Oh yeah, it can burn out your voice. You are also an actress on stage, and you have done a number of productions. And here's a question for you. By the way, if you want to find out more about our guest, Ruth Kaufman, go to ruthkaufman.com, and you can find out everything you want, not only about her, but about her books. You can learn more about her, Ruth Kaufman, author and the actress. Like I said, she lives in Chicago, which is a great city. You can go to ruthkaufman.com, ruthtalks.com, and you also can find her on Twitter at Ruth Kaufman. And and I'll tell you what, this young lady has not. I almost was going to put in the thing to Facebook today, a modern day Renaissance woman, but
thank you. I like that.
Yeah, I was going to put that in there, and then somebody said, no, she's not Leonardo da Vinci. And I thought, well, okay, all right. So she did perform autopsies on stuff like that. But Ruth, let's talk a little about your stage training. Excuse
Well,
me, before we get
let's. Okay.
into the books, because the books are just absolutely fabulous.
Okay.
Is there one part? Is there a bucket list for Ruth Kaufman of one part, or a
Well,
production that you want to be part of before it's all said and done?
there are a few, but here's the thing. Despite the fact that there are so many theaters in Chicago,
Mhm.
unfortunately the compensation for most of them
Mhm.
is is very low. I There are several very high quality theaters here that just pay maybe $300 for the entire run of a play. So
Mhm.
unless you're at the upper echelons to be at the Goodman or Shakespeare repertory in the upper high equity contracts,
Right.
I am trying to, as we've discussed, I'm trying to make it a career. So I just can't afford right now to invest in some plays, even if I would get cast, which you never know.
Mhm.
So I really have been trying. I love theater. I have done theater in the past, but that's why I'm trying to concentrate on the voiceover and on camera, where the remuneration is more equal to the time put in my
Right.
experience anyway.
But
But I
what would
love theater. I would love, yeah.
what part though? I mean, is there a special part that you say, boy, if that opportunity came up, boy, I really would love to have the part in that production and play
Well,
that
yes.
particular role?
I don't sing well enough, but my favorite show is Candide
Ooh.
by Leonard Bernstein. So if I sang better, I would want to be in that.
Mm-hmm. Who influences you as a performer?
Hmm, that's a good question.
I never asked
I
bad.
guess it's. Go ahead.
I said I never asked bad ones.
Well, I'm sure you don't. I would say it depends on where I am at the time. I can watch, for example, you had mentioned Tina Fey. She is just so funny, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in a subtle way that can be harder to do, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I admire people who can make me laugh out loud.
Yeah.
And so that can
Funny.
be role specific.
Yeah. Yeah. What about a production? Candide again?
Hmm. Oh, well,
Because you've done
that's tough
Shakespeare.
I
You've
mean,
done Shakespeare. You've done a number of
well, that was in
Shakespearean plays.
college.
Yeah.
Yes, but I haven't done any what people would call professional Shakespeare. But I
Mm-hmm.
love Shakespeare. I have seen a lot of Shakespeare. I've been to the Stratford Festival more than 20 times, but they actually did the best production of Candide that I ever saw. So, but I also have been a fan of Les Mis because I've seen that about 8 times. I guess it's things I want to go see again and again.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Let's turn over now and start talking a little bit about these wonderful medieval books that you have written. And I know that in your bio and everything that I read about you, one of the reasons why you picked this particular time frame in history,
Hmm.
War of the Roses
Hmm.
period from the 1400s, is because of your college days of doing Shakespeare.
Yeah.
But is there also sort of a romance you have with that period of history on a
I
personal level?
do like castles. I just love castles, and I love knights. I actually own a knight in shining armor. I just think, I know, of course, they were cold and drafty, supposedly, and there were wars, but there's wars now. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it's not like you can say, well, look, we live in times of peace, but um, I just find castles and knights and ladies in gowns very romantic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always been interested in that, even perhaps more than American history. I just found that more interesting. And so when I was in a production of Richard III in college, and you start wondering, is everything Shakespeare said true? And
Mm-hmm.
I started doing some research and buying books on the period. And then I just bought more books and more books. And then it seemed maybe I should find a use for these books.
Mm-hmm. When you start sitting down to write a book, and many of your books, by the way, have turned into series of books, not all of them, but many of them do. Is that a conscious thought that goes through your head when you're preparing an outline or thinking about writing a new book? Maybe this will turn into a series, or is that just something happenstance that you go, oh, this has got legs. It has more than just one
It can
book.
be both. because I like the Wars of the Roses so much, I decided to combine some of them into more of a historical series. Usually in a book series, it might be like the next book is the heroine's sister, or the hero's brother. But I don't really have many connected characters that are fictional. The connection is the underlying history.
Right. And of course, your latest was My Once and Future Love, Unsung Knights of the Round Table, which, it's funny in kind of a weird way, because I've always been fascinated by Knights of the Round Table. And of course, we have discovered, thanks to modernization and television and all these investigative reporters and shows like the History Channel and the Discovery Channel, that when you look back at the adventures of Robin Hood, there was a man very similar to that. Now, he may not have been called Robin Hood or Earl of Locksley. There was a gentleman very similar to Richard the Lionheart, although they say that was taken from an actual king, but he wasn't quite that brave to go off and go down for the crusade with other knights. And there may have very well been Knights of the Round Table, but not quite as glamorous as we portray them in all our books and stuff. So when you're unfolding a book, and before you even begin, where do you start? Is it with a basic outline? Do you have an idea that's been rolling around in your head? Where do you begin to write?
A lot of people are plotters, so that would be the outline that you're talking about, but I'm the opposite, which is called a pantser, which means I write by the seat of my pants. So usually what happens for me is I see in my head sort of like a little movie, the first scene. And that's what happened with my first book and my second book and my fourth book. So the first scene just sort of pops in my head, and then it's sort of, why is this happening, or what happens next?
You can. We're talking to Ruth Kaufman. She's a wonderful author and actress of note. You can find her books at Amazon.com, correct?
Yes, that's where they are.
And I guess you go under Ruth Kaufman, and they all amazingly show up. I love the art on the covers. The art is just fantastic.
Thank you.
I mean, who does your artwork for you? Is it one person or a number of people?
My first three books was one cover designer called the Killian Group, Kim Killian. And then the second book was Sylvia Frost. The fourth book, because I was going to start a sort of a new series, Sylvia Frost designs. So just doing the cover and picking the cover model and coming up with the font that you want and the cover copy and the images can be time consuming. It's fun, but it's also, looking through the stock photos, you sort of see what you want your hero to be doing. And if you can't find someone doing that, it can be a challenge.
When you first got started writing the different books, did you have to at first self-publish, or were you lucky enough to find a publisher right away?
I did pursue New York publishing for quite some time. I briefly had a William Morris agent. I had another agent at a major agency, and those didn't quite work out. One of my books won a national contest, and so that interested a publisher, and they sent what's called a revision letter, meaning they like the book, but they want you to make some changes. So I made the changes. They sent another revision letter, and then they still said no. So after that, and that was probably about the 12th revision letter I'd received for maybe 6 or 7 projects, I decided to self-publish.
Yeah, and that's what caught somebody's eye?
Well, I did it myself. So
yeah, but I mean, are you still self-publishing, or have you moved on to a publisher now? Oh, you're still self-publishing.
In today's world, at least in the circles I travel in the romance writer community, traditional publishing isn't always what it used to be, and writers, even with traditional contracts, are still expected to do all their own promotion. They're expected to do all their own platform building. So a lot of people that I know that were traditionally published have just left that market behind, and some are still doing both. But, it used to be the holy grail, and so publishing was just, poo-pooed. But the market has changed so rapidly that, in my experience, that's no longer the case. I personally would still appreciate a traditional contract, but it doesn't seem that is going to be. So
it seems as though with the self-publishing, you have a bit more freedom for yourself where you're not under the thumb of a publisher. So you're kind of in command of your own ship, and you don't have to worry about rewrites and what somebody suggests who hasn't a clue as to what you're really writing, because sometimes the editors, they don't know about the medieval times really, or any other times that somebody's writing about. But I suppose there is the safety net of having a publisher, but at the same time,
I think it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, but you seem to be very successful.
Go ahead. Oh, well, thank you for saying so. But, having beautiful covers and even great reviews and national contest wins doesn't necessarily mean people are buying your books.
Well, but I think you probably have enough out there that you have an idea that you have an audience. And you just came back from a conference, didn't you not? I believe, at the beginning of this month, somewhere along the line, on December 4th and 8th, the Royal Christmas author hop, I believe is what it was called.
Oh, that was well, thank you for noticing. That was a blog hop. Just some authors got together to just post and give away some books and encourage readers to stop by and chat with us and get to know us. So it's not an actual conference. It's built for readers to get to know our books and stop by, and we gave away some books and some Amazon gift cards and things like that. So it's just a way to help get your name out there in a market that has so many books.
Where do the basic, I mean, you just said earlier, it's sort of like you have an idea on the seat of your pants, and that's how you write. But do you do any research at all? I mean, I know you have a research background. Do you research things like Gore Vidal, who was one of my favorite authors and writers, used to change history to fit his storyline? Do you, in your research, do that a little bit yourself?
Well, sometimes I can, because especially in the period I write about, a lot of times books will say, I mean, I have now over 200 books of my own on the 15th century. Plus, I've also gone several times to the Newberry Library, which has in Chicago, which has an extensive, very interesting collection of books. But a lot of times when I write something, it'll say, and no one knows what happens next. And that's my favorite thing, because then I can say, I know what's going to happen next.
Does, as a story...
I do not change.
No, go ahead.
I mean, I research very carefully and as accurately as possible, to make sure the king is in the right castle or the historical event is on the right day. And there are a couple things I might just combine because, the book can't go on forever. And then I will write an author's note and explain if I felt I had to sort of do something.
Yeah, they do that in the movies. They condense it down and take 2 or 3 episodes and really make it into one or something like that. Right. As you're developing a book, just in particular, any book you want to mention, we're talking to Ruth Kaufman, author and actress, and absolutely marvelous, talented young lady.
Very sweet.
Well, I try to keep my Chicago politeness up, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. As you're moving along with your storyline, do you allow it to flow freely without much of a control, and you are even surprised sometimes with where you're going?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In my second book, a villain that I wasn't intending to have killed got killed, and then I had to figure out who did it. So that's sort of where I use an improv rule. There's a rule of once something has been established, like if you and I were in a scene and you said to me, Ruth, I'm so glad you're my sister. I'm not supposed to come back and go, no, I'm not your sister. I'm your wife. You're not supposed to negate something that's been established. Yeah. So if I write something that happens, it's now a thing, and then I just have to figure out how that could be.
So your acting background and your improv background, allows you to be a little freer, a little open to things as they unfold as you're writing. So you're
I
acting.
like to think so.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was one of my many questions. Has your acting allowed your writing to even improve and get better, and is enhanced the overall?
I hope so.
Yeah, well, hopefully. I mean, because you didn't live during those times. If you did, you need to talk to a lot of medical physicians. Who reads your books? I mean, you just got through having a little book thing, but comments that you get from people and questions and people who meet you, who love your books. Who are they out there?
Well, romance readers read a lot. They could read, more than 10 books a month, some of them.
Wow.
So there's just a collection of readers who love books set in certain time periods. And so I myself, that's how I wanted to write medievals also. I read so many, and I love them. And you start, I might jump to some other periods, but I mostly read medieval romances, and so that's in part why I wanted to write them.
Mm-hmm.
But there's Regency romance, there's Western romance, there's even Amish romance. There's
Amish
so many
romance?
Yeah, they're
Amish?
all comic books.
Really?
Amish. Yeah.
That brings up a lot of jokes that I'm not going to go to right now, but that
it's a very popular category these days. Yeah, and some categories come and go. When Twilight was very popular, vampires were huge, and so they sort of had their rise and fall. So different subgenres become popular for whatever reason, and then something else takes over. So.
But not all romance. I mean, when you think about someone reading a romance novel, and it's a terrible stereotype, and I think you know where I'm going with this. It's sort of like, who watches the soap operas? Well, I got news for you. A lot of football players, NFL football players, love to watch soap operas.
Yeah.
Are your readers primarily female, or is it crossover, a younger, older
There
men?
is, it's a mix. I would say mostly female. But there was something I was going to say, and it just flew right out of my head. But it is, a wide audience. And romance, I believe, is the highest earning genre, even over mystery, I believe. I might have to double check and look that up. But it is definitely more than $1 billion a year business. So there's a lot of people out there buying a lot of romance novels.
How important is it for you to connect with your readers?
I really appreciate it. And now with online, it's easier to do so, on Facebook, or I'm not on Twitter maybe as much as I should be, but that's why I do try to go to conferences or book fairs every now and again so that you can actually meet people in person. Because and some people start up readers groups. I haven't done that yet, but maybe I will if I get more readers. You have to have more readers to get them engaged with you. So there is a lot of additional work beyond the writing in terms of keeping your platform up and trying to get your name out there when there's now hundreds of thousands of romance novels available on Kindle. So.
Yeah, you were talking about all the different types of genres that are out there. I have been since, I guess I was a little fellow, always interested in the Western, and I've always been interested in history. But I collect Native American art, and of course I must have 75 to 100 books on Native American history, Native American tribes. I have some of my artwork has been created for me by some of the top Native American artisans in this country.
Wow.
When Kevin was doing Dances with Wolves, I went up there and got to meet a lot of the Native Americans that were part of the movie. And I was presented with a war lance because the gentleman who was in charge of the group, I guess he was the chief, he thought my impressions were so funny and he enjoyed them so much that he gave me an actual war lance from the movie. So I was very happy about that. But that's my genre. I love Native American stuff. I'm reading John Dickerson's book now about elections and history and stuff, and that's what really, really gets me, and that's what I really love probably the most. So that probably has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you as a person gravitate to is the kind of books you'll probably at least start with. You might move on to other things, but
now in line with your acting as well as your writing. I know as an actress, if you can, and you're up for a part, you're going to go maybe to an acting coach and they'll help guide you through it. If you're having, what do you do as a writer when you're having maybe not necessarily writer's block, but you're having problems breaking through with the character? Who do you talk to, or do you just kind of push yourself away from it for a while and take a walk either in Lincoln Park, or I know you live in the suburbs, but Grant Park, Lincoln Park. I mean, what do you do? Do you go to other writers and talk to them and try to work it out and try to work through it, or how do you work with it?
I definitely have. I have some close writer friends, and they might do it with one of their books, or sometimes you do and sometimes sometimes you just move on to something else and hope it comes to you at another time. I mean, for me, sitting and trying to force it isn't the answer. As you say, I might work on a different part of the book, or I might, work on a different book even, or I might go away for a day or two and just not even work, and then hope, kind of in the shower, something pops into your head. I think
Right.
when you're not focusing on it so hard,
Yeah. Things
and
will
trying to force it. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Do you
So that's what
do you,
seems to work.
yeah, how about suggestions from your audience or from friends?
Hmm.
Do you get those?
No,
No?
no,
I mean, if you're working on a book, your friends or your girlfriends or male friends don't have suggestions for your book, or they just know better?
not really. No, I mean,
Really?
it never comes up in conversation, or they never. What kind of suggestion are you suggesting?
Yeah, no, I just meant in the sense of oh, this would be a good storyline, or gee, I love that.
Oh, no,
No.
no, no,
Mhm.
not
I
yet.
thought.
I've known it. Yeah, it's happened to some friends I know where people will clamor, let's say, to have a secondary character
Mhm.
in a book, get her own book, his or her own book. I have known friends that's happened to, but that has not yet happened to me.
Not yet, huh?
No,
Gee,
not yet.
because people and as a comedian, people always will come up to me. Hey, did you hear this latest joke? Or hey, I loved how you did that joke, but boy, it would be funnier this way. And they're not even in the business, so I just kind of,
Yeah.
I just kind of laugh it off. Best advice you ever got, whether it be an actress or as a writer, that you use and carry with you today?
The best writing advice for sure comes from Nora Roberts, who is one of the most, maybe the most prolific living romance author. She said, you can't edit a blank page,
Mm.
because a lot of writing is rewriting. There are very few people who, can just spill a book out of their head and never go back and fix anything. But,
Mhm.
so she was basically saying, if you have nothing on the page, you have nothing to fix. So it's all about keeping writing. And then the best advice, I don't know who gave it to me, but, for people who always say, I'm going to write a book someday, well, start writing tomorrow and write a page a day, and then in a year you'll have a book.
Yeah, you'll have 365 pages.
That's right.
Yeah. I was reading some of the comments that you had made. When you want to get away from the genre that you work in, what do you
Mhm.
enjoy reading, or is it the same thing, the medieval times?
I might go to read some actual historical fiction. I do like Elizabethan books, Tudor books. So I do actually like time travels. So I might look for one of those.
Huh. So the Star
Yeah.
Trek kind of something or another?
Well, that's more science fiction. I was thinking more along, if you're familiar with Outlander, that's probably the most popular time travel
No, the only
right
thing I'm
now.
familiar with that would be Highlander to me. That would be,
Well, I love Highlander as well. That counts. I actually went to Lithuania to be an extra in Highlander 5, which was awesome as a Highlander fan. But Outlander's a show on, I believe, Stars, and it came from a very famous set of novels by Diana Gabaldon.
yeah. When
Yeah,
you say you were in the Highlander, was that the TV series or the movie?
the movie. I was an extra in Highlander 5.
Oh, okay. Because I knew some of the actors that were in the TV series, and
Hmm.
I always enjoyed that thought process of
I
living
love.
for 400 or 500 years.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when the end comes, it comes, and I mean, you lose your head over it.
You do. May there
Yeah.
be only one.
Yeah. Well. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a comment on that one too, but I'm not going to go there. That's too political
Uh-oh.
for me. Uh, what if and now this is we're going to get a little more serious here in the last we got
Okay.
about 5 minutes to go.
All right.
If God came to you tomorrow and and he
Okay.
said, Ruth Kaufman, and we're talking to Ruth Kaufman here. She's a great author and actress in Chicago. You can go to Amazon.com and look for Ruth Kaufman, and you'll find all her books, as wonderful they are. And she'll be at a production near you or on the TV channel in a commercial or a voiceover. Ruth, if God came to you tomorrow and said, okay, you can only do one thing for the rest of your life, You will be a
Ooh,
tremendous success at it, but you can only do one thing for the rest of your life.
that's
Of
a good
all the things
question.
that you do well, what would that be?
hmm I would choose on-camera work. If I knew I was going to be, if God is telling me I'm going to be successful, that is what I would choose. I have the most fun. Um, I mean, I love voiceover, I love writing, but I think I do like on-camera work the best.
Really?
hmm
Well, I can't get any on camera work no matter what I do, even in Vegas. And they would hire me constantly to do casino stuff. But after a while, the client started to say, he looks too much like Jay Leno. We can't use him. That ended me doing anything on camera. And besides, I'm better off not having my face seen, and I'm better off being behind a microphone anyway. But that's
Well,
interesting.
but that's part of what it is. I mean, it's not always about being the beautiful ingenue because
Uh,
I'm certainly not that.
oh, come on.
It's not. I never have been and never. Ingenues look a certain way and they're a certain age, which I'm beyond that. It's about I like being able to combine. I love voiceover, but
Mhm.
on camera adds the element of also having to worry about what your physical self is doing more. You
Right.
know, when you do
Yeah.
do voiceover, and I'm sure when you do radio, you do gesture, you do expressions, but nobody sees them. And so I like being able to combine everything into on camera.
It's funny when I used to do animation, the cartoonist, the artist would be there
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
studio with you. When I used to do video games, the artist
Yeah.
would be there with you, and they watch your hand gestures, your facial expressions, and
Mhm.
and you find that they later incorporate that into the character that you're doing, because it's kind of funny. Even if you were to lean into the microphone a little bit or lean back, they have the character maybe lean into the screen or whoever he or she is talking to, and it's
Uh-huh.
always fascinating. That's what I always liked about voice work. I could show up in a pair of shorts, a Hawaiian shirt, and have a whole lot of fun and go home and say, well, I made a nice buck for the day. That's for sure. Because in
There
LA,
is that too. Yes.
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Don't have to worry about your makeup.
As a matter of fact, the first check I ever got, which was in Miami when I was still at the University of Miami, I took it and brought it home to my dad. And I said, here, Dad, you never said I was going to make a dime doing voice work. Here you go. Okay.
Wow.
Now I never made a check on a consistent basis like he did. He was an airline pilot, but nevertheless,
Mhm.
I still did pretty well with it, and I had a whole lot of fun. We have about 2 minutes left before we have to say goodnight. But what's up for you? What's next? Where are you going?
Well, I just did this week a commercial that will be on national cable TV and on the internet. I don't think I can say the product yet. I just had a video come out for the Onion's Clickhole channel. It's part of their Witnessing History series.
Mhm.
So I have just I picked up a nice new radio client that has already started sending me some work. So hopefully I did a bunch of feature films, independent feature films this year that I hope will come out next year.
Right.
So I'm hoping more roles will be on the books.
And what about your writing? Anything new coming out in the upcoming year?
The only thing I'm doing right now is I'm combining my first 3 books into a box set, the Wars of the Roses trilogy. To be honest, I'm not quite sure if I'm going to continue to write books. I do love it, but the amount of time that I'm needing to put in is not being balanced out at this time by the sales. So I'm
Hmm.
not sure if it's at some point I have to anyway, analyze income versus outgo.
Right, right. I mean, you
So
you
I'm
have
not
to.
really sure. I appreciate your asking, but I have written other books that I could release, but you still do have to, pay for the cover, pay for the editor, pay for some
Hmm.
promotion,
Right.
that kind of thing. So I'm in analysis mode.
We have been talking to Ruth Kaufman. She is in my hometown of Chicago. If you want to check out her books, go to ruthkaufman.com. Also, we didn't get to the peanut butter and chocolate milkshakes, but we will at some other time. Check her out at
You're good.
ruthkaufman.com, ruthtalks.com. Go on Twitter at Ruth Kaufman. Go to Facebook, Ruth Kaufman, author and actress. She's an absolutely splendid, wonderful young lady. And I thank you, Ruth, for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here tonight on on the Express. I hope you have a happy holiday. And as a former Chicagoan, being in 78 degrees at the moment here in Central Florida, please try to stay warm. I know you like the cold weather, but try to stay warm.
I will. And thank you so much, Gary, for having me, and happy holidays to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Ruth. That was Ruth Kaufman, ladies and gentlemen. And on behalf of all of us here at TMV Cafe and The Express, just thank you all very much for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us. Again, catch me on Facebook at Gary Allen. You can also go to youtube.com, Gary Allen, The Express, Thursday night at 7 p.m. DiversityBroadcastNetwork.com is where the show will repeat itself. ProgressiveVoices.com on their demand and app channel. It'll be up there on Friday. TuneIn.com. And as I said, after the first of the year, about the middle of January, you'll be able to just go to my new website and you'll be able to click in and link into everything and anything. This is the last show until next year. I hope you all have a very safe and sound holiday season. And Randy, thank you so much. I know you listen in every week. And EW, I couldn't do this without you. And thank you very, very much for everything. And everybody out there, please have a safe, wonderful holiday season. Take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.